Welcome to the Debka File, a weekly roundup of exclusive news, insight, and analysis from the Middle East, broadcast to you live from the heart of the region. Coming up on the program today, high expectations from the U.S.-North Korean summit in Singapore. Israel launches unscheduled military exercise on Golan. Russian and U.S. generals fail to agree on Syria's southwestern borders. U.S. and Russia pull back troops in Syria. U.S. will not withdraw from the Al-Tanf outpost. Trump to elevate Israel's NATO standing. Will Trump and Putin have a summit? And now to our top headlines. Although the U.S.-North Korean summit with U.S. President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have yet to take place tomorrow, June 12th, the details of the meeting have already been discussed by representatives from both sides. Prior to boarding the flight to Singapore, Trump told reporters that he would know in the first minute of their meeting whether Kim Jong-un was serious about dismantling North Korea's nuclear program. Trump held a press conference on June 9th and stated that he's confident about what could result from the summit.
Probably rarely been done. It's unknown territory in the truest sense. But I really feel confident. I feel that Kim Jong-un wants to do something great for his people, and he has that opportunity. And he won't have that opportunity again. It's never going to be there again. So I really believe that he's going to do something very positive for his people, for himself, his family. He's got an opportunity, the likes of which I think almost, if you look into history, very few people have ever had. He can take that nation with those great people and truly make it great. So it's a one-time shot, and I think it's going to work out very well. And that's why I feel positive, because it makes so much sense.
4 different teams have been working nonstop in Washington, Pyongyang, Beijing, and Singapore on programs for denuclearization and ending the ballistic missile threat, as well as improving North Korea's economy and guaranteeing the security for Kim Jong-un's family. However, the ultimate decision on all points will remain with Trump and Jong-un. Trump told reporters on his flight from Canada that he also intends to sign an accord with Jong-un to end the Korean War after over 7 decades. Preparations are being made for the meeting. Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, who's hosting the summit, discussed these arrangements at a news conference in Singapore on June 10th.
From our point of view, it's important that the meeting take place and that the meeting has a positive outcome, sets developments on a new trajectory and one which will be conducive to the security and the stability of the region. I would say plus or minus around $20 million. We may be able to recoup a little bit of that, but I think it is a cost which we are willing to pay, and it's our contribution to an international endeavor which is in our profound interest.
On Sunday, Israel launched a spontaneous military exercise on the Golan. Thousands of soldiers were ordered to report for duty in full gear. Debka sources report that the command was prompted by the Syrian military announcement of a major army offensive this week in the Quneitra region opposite Israel's Golan border, as well as a twin offensive against the Dara province on the Jordanian border. Israel's Golan exercise was announced to deter a Syrian offensive. Bashar Assad commanded his army to move ahead when General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint U.S. Chiefs of Staff, and General Valery Gerasimov, chief of Russia's general staff, failed to reach an agreement on the Syrian front. According to Debka File military sources, Assad's offensive force consists of the Syrian army, Hezbollah, and the Shiite militia from Afghanistan, which fights under Revolutionary Guards officers and who have already established themselves outside Quneitra. Debka sources report that Hezbollah and other pro-Iranian units are increasingly disguising themselves as Syrian troops under the command of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. These troops are being absorbed into the Syrian army to support claims by Tehran that there are no Iranian troops in Syria, only military advisors. Hezbollah units dressed in Syrian uniforms are stationed at the Mount Hermon border town of al-Hadar, while Afghan Shiite militias in Syrian attire are positioned in Quneitra, opposite Israel's Golan border. Last Tuesday, the U.S. withdrew from the northern Syrian town of Manbij as Russia withdrew Qasa'ir near Syria's border with Lebanon. Russian President Vladimir Putin stated the following at an annual televised question and answer session with Russian citizens.
Применение наших вооруженных сил в боевых условиях – это уникальный опыт и уникальный инструмент совершенствования наших вооруженных сил. Никакие учения не идут в сравнение с применением вооруженных сил в боевых условиях. Напомню, что тысячи боевиков, выходцев из Российской Федерации, из стран Средней Азии, с которыми у нас нет контролируемых границ, скопились там на территории Сирии. И лучше было работать с ними, условно говоря, работать и уничтожать их там, чем принимать их здесь с оружием в руках. Наши военные находятся там для того, чтобы обеспечить интересы России в этом жизненно важном регионе мира, близким очень от нас, и они будут там находиться до тех пор, пока это выгодно России.
Last Tuesday, Heather Nauert, State Department spokeswoman, stated that the U.S.-backed Syrian Kurdish YPG militia would withdraw from the northern Syrian town of Manbij. The U.S. has given the YPG fighters a guarantee of safe conduct for their retreat from Manbij to the area east of the Euphrates River. Turkish President Erdogan has removed Kurdish fighters from central and eastern Syria on the Turkish border, but has not achieved his goal to take over the city. Pompeo refuses to allow Turkish forces to move in and arrange for the town to be run by a new Manbij military council with U.S., French, and Kurdish military representatives. The Kurdish militia agreed to leave if some Kurdish military advisors could remain in the city to work with the military council. Pompeo agreed that Turkish military advisors could enter the town to keep track of the military council. Meanwhile, Washington and Ankara continue to remain divided. The Trump administration objects to Erdogan's decision to purchase advanced S-400 air defense missiles in Russia and is undecided on whether to sell Turkey F-35 stealth fighters. Moscow is attempting to push Americans out of its Al-Tanf outpost in eastern Syria. The past 3 weeks, Russian propagandists attempted to paint a false picture that the U.S. and Israel had agreed with the removal of Iran and its allies from southern Syria. Moscow's new strategy is based on an international media campaign that gives the false impression that Trump has already approved evacuating the outpost. The U.S. presence in Al-Tanf is a major problem for Moscow as it blocks Russia from opening up this part of eastern Syria for the Syrian army to move in and evict the Syrian rebel militias in Dara and Quneitra. The U.S. base controls a 34-mile zone, and its forces have been training Syrian opposition forces since 2016. Last Saturday, Syrian Foreign Minister Walid Muallem stated that the U.S. military presence is illegal and should leave. Russian, Syrian, and Iranian sources accuse the U.S. of expanding the Tanf base. Russia, Syria, and Iran attempted to create the impression that the U.S. had agreed to give up the Al-Tanf base in return for a Russian guarantee that the Syrian army would not attack U.S.-backed forces in Syria. Debka sources report that John Bolton decided to respond in several ways. First, the Trump administration is only willing to consider the understanding reached between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin last July, in which they agreed to establish 2 de-escalation zones in southern Syria. Washington contacted Moscow with a message that the U.S. has no intention of withdrawing from Al-Tanf or making any concessions. The U.S. position applies to all areas east of the Euphrates River. Trump insists that Moscow abide by the deal between Obama and Putin 3 years ago in regards to the division of Russian and U.S. areas of influence in Syria. Last Monday, Mike Pompeo and Turkey Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu agreed on a plan for Kurdish fighters to withdraw from the northern Syrian town of Manbij. The Pentagon will continue its efforts to put together a local army of up to 100,000 troops to block attempts by Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah to seize territory in the north, east, and south. With us to discuss these issues is Yosef Livnei, former Israel ambassador to El Salvador, Mexico, and New Zealand. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So what is the best case scenario for the summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un?
I think it's very difficult to foresee exactly, but I think that the best scenario that one can expect is a decision to jumpstart a series of discussions and talks between North Korea and the United States over the many issues that are on the table. I think that given the character of the two people, the two leaders, it is extremely difficult to guess ahead of time how it will turn out. But as I said, I think that the best scenario would be for a joint communique stating that the United States and North Korea will discuss further the issues that separate them.
And what do you think the worst case scenario could be?
Oh, I think that if after 1 minute, as President Trump said, somebody stands up and walks out of the room, I doubt very much whether this would happen. But, you know, they may find that the schism between the two of them is so deep that it will be very difficult to find some bridging formula to allow for further discussions. But let's be hopeful.
We just heard the Singapore Prime Minister state that this summit could change the trajectory of developments in the region. Do you see reunification between the two Koreas?
Oh, I think it's very premature to speculate on such an outcome. The reunification of the Korean Peninsula, I think, is not on the table at all. What's on the table is North Korea hopefully wanting to have to lift some of the sanctions, make sure that the regime is safe. The United States wants some assurance that North Korea will denuclearize. I don't think that the reunification is on the table.
Do you think that this summit could have short-term implications on Iran and its nuclear capabilities?
That's a very good question. We'll have to wait and see what's the outcome of this summit. We'll see where it goes from the conversations. And who knows, it may have some impact, especially if the United States makes it a point to demand North Korea from suspending any cooperation it might have with Iran.
We heard Putin state he doesn't plan a long-term permanent situation in Syria. What will happen to the naval base in Tartus and the air base in Khmeimim?
Well, I don't know to what extent President Putin means that a possible withdrawal of Russia from Syria is something that will happen in the immediate future. I think that Russia is in Syria for the long run, and I doubt very much whether they will abandon their bases. We have to remember that even when the Soviet Union existed, Syria was always a base for Soviet presence in the northeastern Mediterranean, and I doubt very much whether there'll be a major change in that respect.
We see the failure of U.S. and Russian top chiefs to agree on the borders of southwestern Syria with Israel and Jordan. What do you see happening in this situation?
I think for Israel, the main point, and it has been stated time and again, is to make sure that no Iranian troops or no Hezbollah elements come close to our border. We don't think that Iran needs to be in Syria. We want to see Iran out of Syria. I think the issue of Iranian presence in Syria will be on the table for the duration. And I think Israel will insist that whatever happens, Iranians are not even close to the Israeli border.
That's Yosef Livnei. Thank you very much for your insight today.
Thank you very much for having me.
President Trump is putting together a plan to elevate Israel's NATO standing, upgrade its war arsenal, and expand the U.S. military presence in Israel. This week, North Atlantic Alliance Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that NATO will not support Israel if attacked by Iran since, quote, the alliance's security guarantee does not apply to Israel. He emphasized that NATO is not interested in getting involved in Middle East conflicts. Last week, Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu visited Germany, France, and the UK to change their stance on the Iran nuclear deal, but none of them were willing to alter their views. Debka military sources reveal that President Trump is planning to lift Israel's status in the alliance while expanding the presence of U.S. troops in Israel and adding to the IDF war arsenal. Stoltenberg and NATO West European leaders do not approve of the U.S. partnering with Israel, a non-member, for a possible strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Meanwhile, Trump has several plans to increase Israel's military capabilities. First, he'll raise Israel from a major non-NATO ally to a member of the partnership, alongside Australia, Finland, Georgia, Jordan, and Sweden. This partnership was established to allow the countries to participate in NATO-led operations and the NATO Response Force. The U.S. fleet will establish a permanent presence in the Israeli ports of Haifa and Ashdod. U.S. Navy aircraft carriers will have a base there. The Lockheed Martin Aegis Combat System, an integrated naval weapons system which uses radar technology to track weapons for destroying enemy targets, will also be used at the ports. In 2017, the U.S. established its first military base in Israel on Mount Keren in the Negev desert to monitor Iranian airspace to the northeast for signs of missile launches. The radar on Mount Keren is the most advanced mobile radar in the world. The Israeli Air Force will also receive additional cargo helicopters and new aerial refueling tankers. The Israeli Army will be supplied with a large quantity of GBU-39s, which are precision-guided glide bombs. The Israeli Navy will be given commando boats and a new submarine manufactured at the Oregon Iron Works. The U.S. will add to its war reserve stock of weapons at the Negev base. The Trump administration is giving Israel and its armed forces the military resources to prepare for a war. On Friday, U.S. President Donald Trump urged the attendees at the Canadian G7 summit to readmit Russia to the group of industrialized nations after its expulsion over the annexation of Crimea. Trump and Putin agreed to begin preparations for a summit, and a meeting will likely take place between Trump and Putin in the coming months. Last Monday, Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov stated that, quote, our president mentioned at the St. Petersburg Forum that Russia and the U.S. certainly have something to discuss, but there have been no particular preparations yet, and the issue of where and when is up in the air. Putin had this to say at a news conference on June 10th.
Президент Соединенных Штатов сам неоднократно говорил о том, что считает такую встречу целесообразной, а я подтверждаю, это так и есть на самом деле. Могу еще раз повторить. В нашем последнем телефонном разговоре он выразил озабоченность по поводу угрозы нового витка гонки вооружений. Я с ним согласен. Для того, чтобы это все предметно обсуждать, нужно, чтобы наши Министерство иностранных дел работали, эксперты работали очень плотно друг с другом. Ну и, конечно, необходимы личные встречи.
And now for a roundup of this week's regional stories you may have missed, the news in brief. Flying cars are the wave of the future, and some of the first models of these innovative vehicles are being developed in Israel. Rafi Yoeli, an Israeli aerospace researcher, has put together a team of experts from the Israel aerospace industry for his company, Urban Aeronautics, to develop a vehicle which would lift people in emergency situations. Yoeli hopes the IDF will be the company's first customer. Zebra Medical Vision, an Israeli medical imaging startup, has raised $30 million in its new round of funding. The company is set to release chest X-ray research along with their new automated chest X-ray analysis product, which will use 2 million images to identify 40 different clinical irregularities. The company uses artificial intelligence to read medical scans and has partnered with Google to provide algorithms on Google Cloud for hospitals and medical professionals. Israeli basketball star Omri Kaspi has invested in Israeli startup Day2, which offers personalized nutrition and dietary plans by analyzing the DNA of a person's gut microbiomes. Kaspi invested in the company after discovering that the app helped him keep healthy blood sugar levels during games. The app's technology is based on a 5-year study conducted at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel by Professor Eran Segal and Professor Eran Enav. The app will soon be available in the U.S. to members of health organizations and professionals in the sports industry. That's all for this week's edition of the Debka File. We'll be back with you next week with all the exclusive news, insight, and analysis from the Middle East. Thanks for watching.